Welcome to the Iron Society podcast, where we build men of God to become husbands and fathers that change the world. No man should have to struggle through life alone or lacking the tools they need to win and dominate life. Every week, we will bring you an inspiring and actionable conversation that will forge you into the man and leader God has called you to be. Welcome to the Iron Society. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Iron Society podcast. And this week, it is a special episode. We have one of the Iron Society Brotherhood members on the show with us today to talk about some stuff that, honestly, we were talking about the other day on a call. And I was like, dude, more dudes need to hear about this. They need to hear about what goes on inside of a man's brain and life when they're going through stuff. So with me today, I have Mr. Dave Roberts. Dave, welcome to the show, buddy.
Glad to be here, man.
Yeah. So, gosh, Dave, how long have you been in the Iron Society now? Like 6 months?
Yeah.
7 months?
April, I want to say, let me look at my calendar. I want to say April 28th.
Yeah. About 8 months. Yeah. So almost 8 months.
Yeah. Cause we talked and had our intro call. It was shortly after my 37th birthday. And
yeah,
it was just kind of, there was a whole lot hitting me all at once. And it was like, I need some help here.
Yeah. So that was going to be one of the first questions I asked you, because we're going to talk a little bit about your experience in the Iron Society up front here. And then we're going to dive into kind of the topic that we were going to be discussing. But before, like, what made you join the Iron Society? Like, what were you looking for? What were you feeling? What were you going through that made you think, like, I need a brotherhood and I need help getting to the next level? Like, what was going on?
Honestly, like I said, I feel like a whole lot hit me when I like at my 37th birthday. There was so much going on. There was a lot going on in my there's a lot going on in my personal life. A lot not necessarily going on in my spiritual life, not the way that it needed to be. I was coming to terms with the fact that my dad died at 47. So me turning 37, I'm like, okay, I've only got a decade left to beat his record. What am I going to do with it? But at the same time, like I'm forging ahead, trying to have a godly marriage. I've been in and out of ministry, but continuing to be kind of dragged back into it. I was mentoring and counseling my worship leader, who was going through some personal struggles and some demons that I remembered. Our neighbor was just getting out of an abusive relationship where her husband put her in the hospital, and trying to help run my company, because my CEO's dad was dealing with pretty aggressive dementia.
Yeah.
So a lot of things, a lot of parallels with that. He and I are really close. So losing your dad and being powerless to watch it, or powerless to stop it as you watch it, that was really heavy. Had a friend just pass away from a heart attack, had to cover a gig for him. And had just coped with a miscarriage. So there was a whole lot going on and feeling really isolated. I grew up as the eldest brother and the only child for the first 12 years. And throughout my life, even though I've been usually the youngest one in the group I've been in, I've been the one people lean on, not the one who gets to lean on people. So that's a heavy rock to wear, man.
Yeah, for sure. That's a lot of weight to be on the shoulders, dude. And the crazy part is like, while situations and circumstances are different for a lot of people, like everything varies. I feel like a lot of most men have a really heavy weight on their shoulders, right? Because it's work, it's marriage, it's kids, it's family, it's this, that, the other thing, right? And then you throw all the curveballs of life in there, and the weight gets, like you said, the ruck gets really heavy. And I mean, I remember being on the call and you were telling me a bunch of that stuff. And I was like, yeah, like you're going through a lot of stuff right now, so fast forward, even, a couple months to now, you've been in the Iron Society. Like what is some fruit that you've seen come from it? What are some changes you've seen? What's your experience been?
Probably some immediate fruit was being energized, feeling like I wasn't alone anymore. Because you can't always rely on a men's group at church for that, especially when you're kind of dotted line on staff.
Yeah.
There's a vulnerability that's necessary that can't be had there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain vulnerability where we as fathers, as husbands, we deal with things that we have to figure out how to deal with without involving our wives.
Yeah.
And I'm not normally like, Kimmy and I have very few secrets, if any, but sometimes the way that we process things, like we want to be comforting, we want to be shepherding, we want to be leading. We don't necessarily want to be word vomiting out in such a way that it causes more stress than it's meant to resolve.
Yeah.
So feeling like I wasn't alone, feeling like I had a group of like-minded brothers that were really on the same page and all running toward the same goal together. That whole not toxic masculinity, godly masculinity, which appears to be a dying breed in 2023.
For sure. Yep.
Just having people that were on that, being able to get more back to my roots, having other to encourage me and have a structured scripture plan, prayer plan, being able to take the fight back to our corner, really having people that you could bounce some of these hot conversations off of that you may not feel comfortable having with anybody else.
Yeah.
But you need to have them with somebody, because if you don't, you're going to turn to a vice of some sort to medicate that. And I've been down that road.
Yeah.
Previously, I've had an unhealthy relationship with food. I've had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I've had struggles with pornography in my past. So it's like anything for that quick dopamine rush. I've dealt with those things and I've worked my way through those things.
Yeah.
But it was imperative, like, especially having 5 kids in a blended family. I have 3, Kimmy has 1, and we have 1 together. It is imperative for me to be able to set that example, to be able to hold that line. So knowing that I was starting to crack, like my foundation was starting to crack a little bit, like that's when you ask for help. You have to humble yourself to reach out for that help. So having that in Iron Society was huge. Being able to be open with my wife about it. And she saw the check-ins and check-outs. She saw the conversations, Cody, that I was having with you. And having her on that journey with me, like over time, that inspired her to be on that journey herself.
That's so cool.
It's like, now we both do devotional every morning. Now we both pray for each other throughout the day. Now our kids have seen that. Like my 16-year-old, my oldest, decided she wanted to be confirmed. She wanted to take the next step to really be a member of the church she had been attending.
Yeah.
That was in no small part due to the example that she was seeing. And she's like, okay, well, I know that you go through a lot, Dad, but I know that I can do it because I'm watching you do it.
Yeah. And dude, that's so powerful. Like, and I just don't want to like gloss over that, because a lot of men, they look at, like, we can't downplay the effects of our leadership. Right. And a lot of guys, when I'm talking with dudes, they're like, hey, I need to learn how to lead in my home. And I'm like, no. Stop. You're already leading in your home. You just suck at it right now. Like we have to just establish that.
You have that leadership role, whether you realize it or not. You don't choose it. It's intrinsic.
Yes.
What you're doing with that. You don't need to learn how to be a better leader. You need to learn how to be a better man of God.
Yes.
And that, if you're following God's heart, those leadership traits are going to be there. And that fruit is going to be borne out by observation. People are going to be watching your witness.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why we start with the identity code and we establish who we are and how we're going to show up. And then we just be that man, and then you see the fruit like you have in your family. It's exactly it. So I love hearing that. And I know we've been on a journey and we've talked about that, but one of the things we talked about recently, because I mean, over the past 8 months, your life has not necessarily gotten any less burdensome, right? Like there hasn't necessarily been less chaos. And I remember it was, a few weeks ago, I checked in like, dude, Dave, how you doing, man? Like, I keep seeing in the check-ins and checkouts, like this, that, and the other thing just coming out of nowhere and smacking you upside the head, man. Like, you okay, dude? How you handling all this? And you started talking about how you wanted to resort back to the old ways of basically head down, grind through it, just kind of and run from anything else that could really push you forward and help you forge ahead in the most productive, godly way possible. Right.
Yeah.
And for hard chargers like us, that's where a lot of men live. It's like, I have this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. Well, I don't feel like I can do anything about it. So I'm just going to put my head down, go to work, get the paycheck, come home and try to survive and do it all over again and try to get some rest on the weekend. And then we'll start it all over again. Right. And it's a vicious cycle that men live in. And for me, men in general living that way, but especially men of God living that way, I'm like, dude, we're missing the freaking boat here. Because I mean, the same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. Like, you have a calling, you have a purpose, you are anointed to do something. And anything less than living up to that is really sacrificing what we have inside of us. And so we started talking about that conversation. So will you talk like everybody through just what was going on in your head when in regards to that, how you wanted to kind of tuck tail and run a little bit, but you're like, no, because I'm having that feeling, I know I need to not do that. And I need to lean in over here. Like, walk us through like that thought process, because it's a powerful thought process that you went through.
Yeah. I'm happy to do that. At that point, and I mean, this really started happening, I would say probably late September, early October of this year. Everything had been going fine. We were kind of in a system. We both got knocked down and got sick. And then getting over that, like, then I was faced with additional stuff at work and additional crises at home, and trying to figure out the financial stuff, trying to figure out how to keep my business afloat, how to best be there for my boss, but how to best be there for my church, like adjusting back into kind of getting called back into an interim worship director role, and feeling like I was kind of short changing everybody.
Yeah.
Where there wasn't enough of me to go around. So it's like, okay, well, I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul, just like we robbed Peter to pay Paul to pay bills when I was a kid. But it's an anxiety response when you get to that point. And my CEO and I are basically brothers. And he even called this out a few months ago. This is pre-Iron Society. He's like, I've noticed that as an anxiety response, when you get overwhelmed, you just start swinging.
Yep.
Where it's like, there's not necessarily any strategy to it anymore, because like you get that overwhelmed, that fight or flight response. So it's like you said, I'm just going to keep my head down. I'm going to start blindly swinging at anything, whether it's the most important thing I should be putting my effort toward or not.
Yeah.
Because I've got to get some blood on the sword. I've got to clear a path so I can get out of here and regroup.
Yeah. And I've always called that the pinata response. Like, it's like
kind of blindly swinging.
You're just like, you're swinging, you got a blindfold on, and you're just hoping to God you make contact with something, and that you're not hitting someone you love or something you care about.
Yeah.
Right. And you're just like, I hope I'm hitting the right thing here, but I have no idea, because I feel like I'm blindfolded and I'm just swinging so I don't die.
Yeah. So when I was in that place, kind of swinging blindly, trying to just make sure one day turns into the next, and like I don't crack up, I don't do something stupid. I try to make sure that I'm staying on my training plan, because exercise is the most underutilized antidepressant.
100%.
Not a substitute for those who need it. I want to be very careful about that, but it's something that's been incredibly helpful for me. And I know it's helpful for a lot of people, trying to stay on track with that. But in that, kind of developing an unhealthy, or like feeling an unhealthy relationship with food start to rear its head again.
Yep.
And okay, well, things are busy. So I was getting kids to school and work blew up. So I didn't have time to do my check-in. Crap, my check-in's late. Okay, I'm going to do that anyway.
Yep.
Because like since April 28th, I've never missed a check-in. I've never missed time in the Word. And building that habit, I was like, I know I need to keep that. But then it was like, okay, well, checkouts, there was a shame component to it, where it's like, I have this unhealthy relationship with food. After everyone goes to bed, like we're snacking, and if I'm doing the math, we're probably putting away 600 to 700 calories a night. I don't want to put that on my checkout. So, I'm just really tired. I just went to sleep. Okay, well, I woke up the next morning. I didn't do my checkout. I'll just let it ride.
Yeah.
Well, let it ride kind of snowballs,
Mm-hmm.
where in that anxiety response, it's like, okay, I'm doing what I need to survive. And
Yep.
part of what I need to do to survive is, once I've gotten through the big push of the day, whatever I need to do to help myself recover, like that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to retreat into myself. I'm going to attempt to regroup in myself so that I can pull myself up by my bootstraps, and maybe tomorrow it'll be better.
Yep.
Well, there were enough tomorrows that went by where that cognitive dissonance that we talk about, that is central to our identity code, central to what we do in Iron Society, like that was pulling at me.
Yep.
Because I could feel the tension between who I was kind of slipping back into,
Yep.
and who I was called to be, because I had seen who I could be.
Yep.
And that pull was like, there was so much going on. That's why I needed to reach out to you and go, hey, I just need to be open and honest here. There's been a lot going on. I'm not trying to distance myself from IS. I'm kind of in an emergency like frame of mind right now.
Yep.
And I needed some help to get out of it.
Yep.
Which is hard to do when you feel like reaching out for that help is just another thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just in the mind of somebody with anxiety and depression, like that, sometimes that one straw is what breaks the camel's back and you become immobilized.
Yep.
But I
What
knew
do
it
you,
wasn't right. So
yeah. What do you think? I mean, this is something that, I mean, gosh, I've worked with so many guys that battle like really deep, dark anxiety and depression, right? Like really deep. And I've gone through my own personal bouts of, I would say, some anxiety, some depression, but like nothing near what a lot of people go through, right? I mean, I've experienced it. And I'm okay with saying that, but I know that what I've dealt with is nowhere near what a lot of people have, right? Because I was essentially able to pull myself out of it after a couple of days, which I know that when you're really battling that, you can't just pull yourself out like that most of the time.
no.
But like, what would you say to the guys that are in a similar place where you were at, of like, that the very act of reaching out for help is exactly what you need, but you feel like that's just another thing that is going to, is like it almost feels like a burden, right? Your blessing is on the other side of reaching out and being able to move forward with the help. But at the same time, it feels like the biggest burden in the world and weight to carry of just reaching out, right? What would you tell a guy that is going through that, where they have not reached out to somebody yet, but they know it's exactly what they need to do?
Yeah, kind of that feeling like like what I don't want to do, I do, and
Uh-huh. Yeah.
etc. I would say just let something else slip if you have to,
Mm,
but make your priority to reach out for that help.
yeah.
Because if
That's
you
good.
don't reach out for that help, you may survive today,
Yep.
but you've sacrificed that ability to have the help to get you through tomorrow, so
Yeah.
that you can start rebuilding your defenses, so you can start refortifying. Because
Yep.
otherwise, if you don't learn to run those things, they're going to run you.
Yep.
And that's what the enemy wants, man. The enemy wants to keep us busy. The enemy wants to keep us kind of tied down in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. And I think, and that's where a lot of guys, especially believers, right? We have this complex that we there's a few scriptures that we look to. It's like, oh, well, I need to sacrifice everything about myself, and I am the last person in the world that I need to take care of because I need to serve all these other people, right? And what most, especially men that follow the Lord, forget is, if you're not taking care of yourself and you're not sacrificing certain things to make sure you're okay, you end up sacrificing all the other stuff anyway. Because it's like, I know, like, just think about it like a car, right? It's like, well, I have to go make all these deliveries over here. And I know my fuel tank is empty, but I got all these deliveries to make and all these things I got to go take care of. And then all of a sudden, you break down on the side of the road because you ran out of gas. And while your heart was in a great place of wanting to serve other people, because you didn't fill your gas tank up, now you can't serve anybody. And that's where a lot of guys end up getting, right?
Yeah.
It's like this.
How do you pour from an empty cup? That, I
Yeah.
mean, and also, like, whether it's cars, whether it's, as I work in IT is my day job. So whether it's that, whether it's servers, whether it's like guitars, like the one I got behind me, like if you don't define that maintenance window, Your equipment will define it for you. And generally, when that happens, the bill is a bit higher.
And oftentimes a lot higher. Yeah.
So personally, like definitely with items in our lives, that's true, but it's more true with ourselves. But it's so easily overlooked in ourselves because as men in this society, like we feel like as husbands, as fathers, as men, and if you're in ministry, that's another layer on top of it. You feel like you've got to have this armor on and you got to spend your time polishing that armor all the time. You can't take it off because you can't risk being vulnerable to somebody else. But the only way to fix what's cut underneath you is to take that off and let somebody else stitch that up. And you're going to end up with a scar from it, but that scar is going to teach you how to stitch somebody else up. And if you don't deal with that, it will immobilize you. And that was a lesson that I started to learn going into Iron Society, and Iron Society has really taught me how important that is. And I've seen that in my own life. I've seen that with other brothers that are in the group. Out of respect, I won't name names, but people I've seen who have taken that fight back to our corner. Like that's where the real support is. And when you're vulnerable and you ask for that, like this group is different. They are not judgmental in that way.
Yeah.
They'll hold you accountable, but they're not going to look down on you for doing it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is the exact opposite of what happened with a member. And I haven't made a deal about this, but I'll tell the story because it falls in line with what you're talking about. A guy joined recently, and the reason he joined is because he had no brotherhood to hold him accountable. His marriage was falling apart. He wasn't taking care of himself as a man, wasn't showing up as the father he wanted to. And I said, okay, cool. What's the one thing that will stop you from becoming the man that the Lord wants you to be? And he's like, when it gets hard, I run. I said, okay, cool. Well, I hear that, but I just also want you to know that like, we can't stop you from running, but we can give you a place to run to, right? Like taking the fight to your corner. And about a week into it, like homeboy got sick and some stuff kind of, it just got quote harder, right? Which I'm like, yep, that's exactly what happens when you start trying to get your life back online is things quote magically get harder. And I always just refer to that as like the resistance, right? It's the first thing that hits right after you start to make a positive change, right? And then all of a sudden this guy wouldn't respond to my texts, wouldn't respond to messages in the group, wasn't showing up anywhere. And then I go look and he deleted his own account and pulled out. Right. And I'm not going to go chase him down. Like, dude, I'm not going to go run after you. That's not it, but I feel like that's what so many guys do. And honestly, that's what you could have done, Dave. Like you could have done that. And you, for all intents and purposes, like nobody really would have blamed you. Right. With everything you had going on, it would be like, you know what? I just can't do this. I don't have time for it and all of that. But what the flip of the switch that you made in your mind was I would be running from the very thing that is the catalyst for helping me grow past this. And that's what a lot of men do. They run away from the thing that helps in some type of like weird thought process of it'll be better if I just don't do this and run after this. And it's just, it's a huge lie and a huge misconception that so many guys make in their life that I'm really happy that you didn't make that. Not because it's like, oh, we would lose a member. Right. But it's like, no, that's just not healthy for the man of God.
Yeah. It's reinforcing. If you reinforce these negative patterns, these negative tendencies you observe in yourself as you become more self-aware, if you reinforce them, they are going to become your default.
Yep.
And especially in moments of crisis, we, especially as men, a lot of times we don't rise to the occasion. We default to our training.
Yep.
It's the same reason a musician practices all the time. Like John Mayer said it once, I practice so much so that when I am out and playing live, it's natural. And the more I practice, the better it sounds, what just naturally comes out.
Yeah.
That's what we need to focus on.
Yep. I remember going through EMT school years ago. One of the senior paramedics said something that I'll never forget. They said, amateurs practice until they get it right. professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. And when she said that, it struck such a deep chord in me, because I feel like a lot of men try to make enough change where they're like, I got it right. Like, I actually had a good week, or I had a good day. Right. And then they let their foot off the gas because I got it right one time. Right. And it's like, no, 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 no. That's not the point. It's to do it so consistently and with such aggression that you get so good at it that you can't even get it wrong. Right. Like, even if John Mayer hits a wrong note, it's probably still in the right key. It's probably still on the right scale. It's like, he's so good at what he does. Even
the accidents sound good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, a man, that is part of our goal. It's to get so good at being the leader of our home, at being the man of God, at growing, at pursuing all these things, at having these rhythms, routines, and disciplines in our life, that even when the hard day comes or that mistake happens, we're still going with so much momentum in the right direction that it's like we're just right back on track and going.
Yeah, it's just a speed bump, or it's just a little pothole in the road.
Yeah.
But to that point, something else that that a lot of men go through, I mean, I know I do, is when something is new, or when you really want to make a good impression, whether it's at a new job, whether it's with a new person that you're dating, you try on your best behavior, and you push as hard as you can so that you can wow everybody with that. And then once you figured out that everyone's saying, oh, you're going above and beyond, this is awesome, I'm like, okay, well, I'm tired. I'm going to slow down just a little bit. And then people slow down just enough to their fact that there's a negative backlash or negative accountability. And then they try and push back up. And then the cycle repeats. It's a cycle I've observed in myself throughout my adult life. And with the Iron Society, for me, it was kind of just the last straw. I was like, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm not going to reinforce that pattern. I need to train differently so that when I'm defaulting to my training is going to keep me on the right path.
Yep.
Discipline yourself for godliness.
Yep. And I feel like, dude, and honestly, a lot of people don't know what our check-ins and our checkouts are and all of that. It's all part of what we do in the Iron Society. But that's been one super cool thing that I've really loved watching you do, is in the midst of these days that go sideways for you, and in the midst of the days where it's like, crap, this went wrong and this went wrong and this went wrong. You always you'll still post your check-in and checkout, and you're always like, I will not let this waver. Like, I will not let it happen. Right. And that right there shows me, like, that's not the same David that existed a couple years ago. Right. The David that would let some stuff slide, and it's like, oh, well, I hope it'll be better tomorrow. Right. Like, you're so like, I will hold the line. I will hold the standard. This is who I am, and this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Hope is not a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely not. So one last question before we kind of call it a show. How would you encourage or exhort men that are listening to this and they're like, dude, everything you're saying about having all this crap going on in my life, all these things going sideways, right? I feel like I'm blindfolded, just swinging, trying to get some blood on my sword, right? All the things that you said. How would you encourage them, and what would you tell them to do to get out of the mode of I'm just trying to survive and stay alive, and actually do something to start making some forward momentum and forward progress to where they can start to feel like they're winning again? Like, how would you encourage them?
I guess there's a few different ways to do it. Like, I would say, take a day. Take a day off, even if you have to.
Yeah.
Like take a day off, and like, if you really need that retreat, take a day off and act like you're going to work. Just sit, post up somewhere. Like, really get down, seek God. Like, and really decide, like, really take inventory. What's important? What's not important? Like, what do I want to be versus what am I now?
Yeah.
And really, really do that homework for yourself. take that time for yourself, even if you got to steal it from something else, to make sure that you can devise that strategy. And yeah, it's really easy to just get caught up in the day to day, but if you stay caught up in the day to day, that's all you're ever going to have.
Yep.
Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, and they underestimate what they can do in 2 or 3.
Yep.
Give yourself that long view.
Yeah.
Like, here's where I want to be. Here's where I am. How am I going to get there? And just internalize, take a second and realize that there's nobody who's going to do it for you.
Mm.
And there are no free rides.
Yeah. I like that, dude. I love that. I love that. Like, no one is in the fire service. We used to say, no one's coming to save you. Like, and that was a common saying amongst all the firefighters, because we were the ones that were there to do the saving. And so for us, it was like, no one's coming to save you. You got to figure it out and do something now. And I think that's where a lot of guys, it's what a lot of guys need to just understand. It's like, Jesus came to save your soul, but the mess you're in right now, you got to pull yourself up and figure something out, dude. Like, you got to make a change and do something, you know? And I really like what you said about take a freaking day and just, like, you know, think a little bit. I've been referring to, like, thinking as the lost art. I just feel like people don't sit and just think anymore. It's just always reactionary and just, you know, always living in that mode of what's the next thing, instead of just sitting back and thinking of the long game. Right. So I love that, dude. Take a day. And I just think that's good for mental health in general for men. Every so often, like, we just need to take a friggin' day and just be real. And it's not a, you know, sitting down playing Xbox and eating, you know, filling your belly button with Cheeto dust kind of a day, you know, but it's intentional thought about, how's my life going? Who am I being? What do I need to change? What do I need to pivot? And what's the outcome I want? Right.
Yeah. How am I tracking based on, like, if I keep doing, and you've said this before, sometimes in your mind vitamins or in your end of week messages, like your Sunday messages, if I did exactly what I'm doing or exactly what I did this last week, and I extrapolate that out another 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, am I going to like who I see in the mirror?
Yep.
And if I don't, then this is the time to make that course correction. I mean, it's just like lining up a shot at 300 yards.
Yeah.
Just a minute movement of a quarter inch is going to result in whether you're on target or whether you're 6 inches right.
Yep. Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, what David's referring to is, I like to call it the Groundhog Day exercise. Like, if today got stuck on repeat for the next year, who's the person that you would be a year from now if today got stuck on repeat? Because it just shows you how important today is, because the only way you get somewhere a year from now is you just repeated a bunch of days. That's all that happened, you know? And so what are the types of days that we want to be repeating? And that's why in the Iron Society, we set ourselves up the way we do. We have our check-ins, we have our checkouts. It's, did you track your nutrition? Did you exercise? Did you read your Bible? Did you journal? Did you encourage another man? Did you have uninterrupted talk time with your wife, with your kids? You know, all these things. Because if you stack all those things together day after day after day after day after day after day, a year later, your life looks totally different. Like, completely different.
At that point, you have built the structure, you have built the systems that you, as long as you keep doing what you've lined out, you are going to succeed, because that trajectory won't allow you to do anything less. Yeah.
That's what, you know, it's funny. I know we're about to call it a show here, but that was something we were talking about this weekend, because Steph and I just had our vision weekend for getting ready to end this year, going to next. We're talking about, like, our kids' discipleship and everything, you know, and she was a little discouraged because she isn't seeing certain things that she wants to see. Right. Which a lot of those are kind of external pressures from other people. Right. And people acting like their kids have all their crap together and they really don't. And I was like, babe, you know, what's really important is not what we're seeing day to day in the kids, but what direction are they heading? Like, what is their heading? Because if their heading is good and it is righteous and it is godly, they will end up where they need to be. They will end up, and that's why scripture says, train a child in the way they should go. right? It's because we don't control all the outcomes. We don't control the actions. But if we can set the proper direction, we've started a heading that will eventually pay off. And I think in our lives as men, we gotta make the shift and just get a little bit of a different direction, and the lifestyle habits and routines and the disciplines that support it. And then all of a sudden your life just starts to look way different.
Yeah, it will be unrecognizable from what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dave, I really appreciate you jumping on today, dude, and being, as we say in the Iron Society, hot with us, honest, open, and transparent. I know that, talking about the stuff you talked about is not always easy. A lot of guys don't like doing it, which that's one thing I would just love to like continue to break with the Iron Society is like, no, this is just normal stuff. This is what real guys talk about, right? It's not about like fantasy football and hunting and all these things. It's like, that stuff's cool.
Let's normalize being vulnerable with one another.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to reframe that. As men, we need to reclaim that.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our culture.
Yep. Yeah. And I love being the hard, resilient, grit-filled man, right? And I think there's a part of every man that needs to have that. But I also think like guys just need to be cool with kicking back and saying like, dude, I don't know what in the world's going on right now. I'm tired. I'm beat up. I need some help. and it's just a normal part of the conversation, just as much as anything else would be,
Mm-hmm.
So I really admire that about you. And I just want to affirm that in you, dude. I'm really proud of you for what I've seen over the past, 7-8 months, in your pursuit of being the man that God has called you to be, because I truly believe, man, you're not the same guy you were 8 months ago. And I know that 8 months from now, you're not going to be the same dude you were today. Like, I just know.
It is bearing fruit. Like one of the most powerful things, like I was sharing my check-in with my eldest, with my daughter, last week. She was on her way out the door to go to carpool. And she was like, I know I wasn't saying much, Dad, but I was listening and I really love what you're doing. What you're doing is helping you. What you're doing is helping us. It's giving me hope. I want to be like you when I grow up.
Wow.
Whether they felt that or not a year ago, I don't know if they would have said it.
Yeah.
If any of my kids would have said it. But they're now at that age where they're more observant. They're looking.
Yep.
So since they're looking more intently, I need to make sure that the example they're seeing in me is worth following.
Yep. Right there, dude. I think that's the quote to end on right there. Is the example our family is seeing worth following? Like, ask that friggin' question to yourself and give yourself an honest answer. Because if we're honest with ourselves, the example that we've been living and we've been setting might not be the example that we want our family to follow. So I think that's super powerful, bro. So, well, Dave, once again, man, appreciate you. Thanks for being on. And for everyone else that's listening to this, man, I'm telling you, if you need the brotherhood to surround you and you need a different trajectory in life, you need to get your butt in the Iron Society, because that's where it's going to happen. So love you guys. Want the best for you. And other than that, we'll see you next week. Dave, thanks for being on, brother.
No problem. Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, one thing before you go, if you got any value out of today's episode, we would so appreciate a 5-star rating and review wherever you are listening to this podcast, as well as, hey, take a picture with your phone of you listening, take a screenshot and post it to social media. Go ahead and tag me at Cody Chapman, and you can tag Nick as well at the Nick Milligan. Also, if you want to learn more about the Iron Society, you can head on over to ironsociety.co to learn more. We'll see you next week.